Everybody in this room has one thing that is exactly the same as everybody else. It's the only thing that we all have in common. It's the same version, it's the same size, it's the same value. We all have this day, today. And it just may be the day that your life could completely change. It was the spring of 2007, before I was entering into my graduate year and final year of playing softball at the University of Virginia. The UVA women's head rowing coach approached me and asked if I'd ever thought about rowing. He said if things didn't work out with the new softball coach they just hired, that I should come out for the team. He would teach me and I could make varsity by the following spring. Now to really sell it, he said, you can be an Olympian one day. I'm from Louisiana. I'm not scared of mosquitoes, but we don't mess around in small boats and water down there. So I thanked him, flattered, but sort of flippantly was, I'll stick with what I know. 3 years later, I would enter rowing into a Google search. I literally Googled the sport. At the time, I was only looking for something new, something different, challenging to do in my free time. I had just moved to West Hartford, Connecticut, where I was living out my dream of working for ESPN. I remember the UVA rowing coach telling me I could be a good rower, so I thought, well, I'm in New England, that's what they do here, I should row. A few clicks of the keyboard and I find a local rowing club, and I sign up for the beginning rowing classes. A few weeks later, I pull into the parking lot of the boathouse, and I'm overcome with this wave of anxiety and fear. I was a two-sport Division I college athlete. I grew up in sports, and along the way, I'd become pretty confident in my abilities, but I was terrified. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know anyone. I didn't want to get out of the car. It was an ungodly hour in the morning, and I was definitely wearing the wrong clothes. Despite this strong urge to flee, I almost drove away, went back to my daily routine, convinced myself that I didn't need this change. I peel myself out of the car and take that big step into the very, very deep end of the unknown. And I wish I could say this first day of rowing was some blissful experience where I sort of perfectly happen upon what I'm supposed to be doing for the rest of my life. The coaches were speaking what felt like a foreign language and using terms and words and calling for drills that I had no context of even beginning to understand. The equipment was big and bulky, yet seemed fragile. My body ached from using muscles I didn't even know existed. My hands were blistered after one session, red and sore from the coarse handle of the oar rubbing back and forth across my palm and fingers. Now, despite how uncomfortable physically and mentally I still was, I knew from the moment that I felt the water running underneath me against the smooth hull of the boat that I was hooked. Now, maybe it was the endorphins talking, but I also encountered this unfettered belief that I was doing exactly what I should be doing, and I wanted more of it. Something inside of me had come alive. I'd been awakened in a way I'd never experienced before, and so I listened. I've never been one to leisurely embark upon anything. Ever since I was a kid, I had to win. I had to be the best. You'd think I'd grown out of that as an adult. Now, along with this newfound passion in rowing, I unleashed a desire to want to be the best and pursue it at the highest level. The best thing that someone told me early on was that you're young enough to be an Olympian, if that's what you really want to do. But you're old enough that you can't wait around. The window of opportunity was becoming only smaller with each passing day. So here I am. I want to become the best in the world at something I've just discovered. And apparently, I'm getting old. Shortly after, I had the fortunate experience of meeting a great training partner. He introduced me to his training group and coach. That following spring, I took a winter training trip with the group down to South Carolina. I was so excited, I just poured my savings into a brand new boat, a racing scull, something I hadn't even been in, but definitely needed. I was like a kid with a new expensive toy, very difficult to master. Now, because of how novice I was, the coach put me in with his junior rowing group. These are 13, 14, 15-year-olds. I'm 26 at the time. There was a day that week I remember, it was a race piece day, test piece day. I got pounded, just annihilated by these teenagers who were all smaller than me and over a decade younger. It was embarrassing, deflating. Who was I kidding thinking I could do this when I didn't even have the experience of a kid? Later at my hotel room that night, I cried. It was a low day. A week later, despite this brutal defeat by high schoolers, I would sign up for the U.S. Rowing National Selection Team Regatta. This was my time to see how I measured up against the Olympians and national team members. Forget the teenagers. Despite the coach's urging to saying that I'm just not ready, I decided to give it a whirl. I remember that first day of racing. It was pretty brutal weather. It was very windy. The water was choppy. My training partner calls out as I'm clumsily making my way down to the dock. He says, "At least pretend like you know what you're doing." I didn't have an idea of what I was doing. That first race, I would almost flip, and I would finish dead last in the entire regatta. 2 years later, I show up to that same regatta. A couple more years experience, a better boat, and a lot more confidence. I would make my way into the final and finish fourth, 31 spots higher than I had at that first regatta. Only Olympians would place ahead of me, and that fourth place finish would award me a spot into the top United States women's double sculls with Ellen Tomek, a veteran rower and Olympian. Later that summer, the thought that just maybe this seemingly impossible dream of going to the Olympics in a sport I'd only discovered 3 years ago began to creep into my mind as I was awarded the bronze medal at the 2013 World Cup in Lucerne, Switzerland. Not to mention that taking third meant we had beat out a 6-time Olympian, a 6-time world champion, and a handful of other rowing superstars. I was standing among the best of the best and holding my own. I had arrived. And now it's April 23rd, 2016. It's the night before the final of the Olympic trials. I'm freaking out. The reality that this day would actually come had been lost in the grind of training and just surviving one day to the next. At the end of tomorrow, I would either be an Olympian or I wouldn't. There was no gray area to fall into, no second chance. It all came down to this one day. Now, when you sit at the start line of a race, you can't think about the finish. You do. You want it to be done. But you have to stay present. You have to stay in the moment. As the referee's giving the call over, I reach up, I put a hand on Ellen's shoulder. I say, "Nobody better. Today is our day." The horn goes off. We blast off the line, clean, strong. We've practiced this 1,000 times over, day after day. But something's wrong. We're down. The boat next to us has gotten off faster, better. They're ahead of us for the first 300 meters of the race. I make a call up to Ellen, breathe, relax, strong legs. The beautiful thing about rowing is that when you get a boat going just right, it appears to take off, effortlessly gliding across the water. The crew is in pain, but they make it look easy. Another few hundred meters, and we take off. 750 meters to go. We've put a significant amount of water between us and the rest of the field. Unless something drastic happens, we're heading to Rio. I let this thought pop into my mind for the slightest thousandth of a second, and then back to full focus. I've worked 6 years of my life for this moment. I'm not about to let my head lose it for me. We're into the red buoys now, 250 meters left in the race. I can hear the crowd roaring, deafening in our ears. Every stroke, I know the finish line is getting closer. And then the horn goes off again, and it feels as if the world stands still. Ellen raises her hands over her heads, and that's when the reality of the moment hits me. We won. We're going to Rio. I'm an Olympian. And then I lose it. I throw my hands in the water, I yell, I scream, everything I can. It's pure elation, pure joy. 3 months later, I would have the honor of competing on the world's biggest athletic stage as a member of the United States Olympic team. Ellen and I would take 6th in the world. 6 years ago, I didn't even know how to properly step into a boat. I went from working a desk job to competing against the best athletes in the world. I've calculated this journey took me all of 2,190 days, give or take. The UVA coach that planted that seed of rowing in my mind on that random spring day would end up being my coach in the Rio Games. One of the high schoolers who handed me that brutal defeat in South Carolina was at a recent Olympic celebration event. She came up to me, a collegiate rower now, and says, "My claim to fame is that I beat an Olympian." But more importantly, that I was an inspiration to her, and she too wanted to be an Olympian one day. My international debut and first medal won at that 2013 World Cup would come 3 years to the day that I almost didn't get out of my car for that first rowing lesson. Throughout this improbable adventure of navigating the ups and downs, the good and just terrible trying days, I came to appreciate the unique value in each one. Shortly after that first regatta, I discovered my secret weapon. I was talking to my coach at the time and I said, "I know I have a long ways to go, but if I can just do something every day, just a little bit of progress every day, I can get there." He nodded. He's very stoic, he's German, says, "Besser jeden Tag." Better every day quickly became my mantra, my personal motto of every day counts. I didn't need to become an Olympian in one day, although that would have been really great and a lot more efficient. But if I could do something every day that put me closer, one stroke, one practice at a time, I believed it was possible. Big dreams can oftentimes feel unattainable or reserved only for someone else. But remember, our days are all equal. 24 hours, 1,440 minutes. And when new adventures feel as though they're something of the past or it's too late for change, there's not enough time to take that unexpected journey, rest assured that all it takes is one day. The significance of this is more important today, now, more than ever. We all have the power of one day. How are you going to make it count? Thank you.